Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. So we're going to take a look at the Liong Mah 15 today, and this is the knife to celebrate his 15 years of designing knives. And for this special build, he decided to attempt an integral flipper with his manufacturer, which is Riot Knives. So we'll take a look at this one, go through the specs, overall impressions, and details just as always. Let's start out with the specs. So what do I have here? Pair 2. And then, what was I carrying today? Yes, the Jesse Jarrow's K2A. So there's a few size comparisons. So in terms of specs, it's a large knife. So you've got a 4-inch cutting blade, and you have a handle length of 5.2 inches. Overall is about 9.2. The handle thickness is about 0.52 inches. There it is next to the para. Weighs in at 4.8 ounces. And let's see here, what else? And then another dimension is in the closed position. The width of the knife is just about an inch all the way through. Up here it gets up to about 1.2, 1.3 give or take, but overall a very long and slender knife. So a few other size comparisons. So the last knife that he did was the Lanny flipper here. So obviously in terms of size, vastly different knives. Look at that. So yeah. And two others also made by Riot. Here's his Warrior 2, which also has the same hand grabbed Tonto blade. And then Riot's offering with a similar blade, grind, is the Riot K2. So 15 Riot K2, Liong Mah Warrior 2. So some different size comparisons, similar and so forth. Okay, so overall impressions, couple things. One, I love integrals. That's no surprise to any of you guys watching my videos. And I really like these hand ground blades that he did on the Warrior 2, that Riot did on the K2. Beautiful workmanship, very, very cool. So, I mean, the fit and the finish is spot on as always with Riot knives. The design is incredible. There's a crazy amount of sculpting and milling and other things that went into this knife that we'll talk about. But obviously I'm in love. I mean, I first saw this design I want to say well over a year ago. So he gave me, he showed me, I think they were CAD drawings, or at least told me about it. I've known it was coming for quite some time. And at the USN Gathering back over Labor Day weekend of 2017, he actually took delivery of a couple of the prototypes, and the, I guess, production prototypes, the very, very first run, whatever you want to call it. This was actually one of those. So he took delivery, and we were at the show, and he said, "Hey, do you want to see one?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he's like, "All right, you just can't let anyone see." I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So he hands me a little case. I legitimately walk over to a corner. I'm standing in a corner, facing the corner, and I'm fondling and handling this knife for 2 minutes, and it was man, I was really impressed. Really, really liked it then. Still like it now. So that's the Liong Mah 15. I'll give you guys a couple, macros here of this knife, so you can see all the design and mill work that went into it. Really crazy. Very cool pocket clip. Stainless steel lock insert. And another interesting thing about this knife is, if you guys are familiar with Bob Lum was a custom knife maker of some praise, certainly. And Liong had wanted to work with him for a long time. They talked about it. They were going to do some projects eventually, but unfortunately Bob Lum has passed away. So, when you're looking at this knife, if you see some cues or some nods to maybe Bob Lum and his fixed blades and so forth, his Tontos, that was certainly on purpose. So, yeah. All right, let me show you the action. Oh, I slipped. That was me. Really nice action. So, All right, let's go through it in detail here. So again, hand ground Tonto blade, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work. Really well done. Now this one does differ in from the first ones that shipped. The first ones that shipped actually have blue down here in the, I guess, vents as we can call them. The handle is stone washed, and I think the blade is stone washed too. Whereas this one is more of a satin finish. You know, you've got your vertical on the primary bevel, and then you have horizontal satins on the flats. So slightly different than, you know, what is initially shipping. There are going to be 3 different versions of this knife, I believe. I have no idea what version 2 and 3 are going to look like. I don't think that this particular setup is going to make it into any of the versions. So, you know, this one's special to me at least. But yeah. There's some jimping up top. He does have his, you know, kind of his signature diagonal cuts into the jimping. Now, one thing is, it's actually really effective, but since the top of the spine here has been, you know, slimmed down quite a bit, that aggressive jimping with such a narrow landing, this portion here isn't terribly comfortable. The wider portion back here and on some of his other knives is actually really comfortable and really effective, but you know, not that anyone's going to hard use this knife anyway. Of course, you could, and you use what tools you have. But anyways, this portion here, the thinned out portion, isn't terribly comfortable for, you know, excess force necessarily. So one consideration, but again, to the people buying this, I don't really think that's going to be a problem. The blade and the handle, the way that they intersect, the flipper tab is hidden in the open position, which is really cool. There's a little recess here in the handle right behind the flipper tab, which actually makes it slightly more comfortable. And then, you know, your thumb can also rest there for hammer grips. So anyways, that is the blade, I believe, for the most part. No sharpening notch, it just transitions like so. His logo, and that is it. Alright, let's take a look at the handle. So again, this is an integral knife, so you just have the pivot, and then you have the stop pin here, which is obviously connected externally. When I got this one, I don't know if it'll be the case for you guys, but I did have to Loctite the stop pin because after a couple dozen flips, it was actually starting to become unscrewed. So put a little blue Loctite on both sides, re-screwed it in, got it just right in terms of tension. You don't want to over tighten because that affects the flipping action. But anyways, again, this one was a first production run / prototype of sorts, so yours might already be Loctited, don't know. Here's his newer style pivot. That was, I don't think this was the first, I don't know. It's been on his newer model, so it's his newer style pivot. It's unique to him and his designs, which is of course always cool. Uses Torx hardware, so easily accessible. Now, let's talk about the vents, because I've seen a lot of comments around these, I don't know, this millwork of these vents and so forth, and I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I think about them. This is not directed at anyone, so hopefully there are not any hurt feelings, but I love these vents. You know, I remember listening to a podcast that Cure Geeks Live and Anthony Scolambruni was talking about the genius of the spider hole, the ability to remove material and add functionality and features to, you know, a knife. That's how he viewed the spider hole, and I kind of view this the same way. So what he's done is he's created obviously a visual appeal design element, but look at the amount of material that was removed from the handles, you know, while not leaving just holes where you could get your finger down in there and obviously cut yourself when closing the knife. So the functional benefit is weight reduction. The knife is also nicely balanced. It's right here, perfectly balanced. So, you know, obviously the weight reduction has helped with that balance to a certain extent. It's attractive, it's visual, it's reduced material. So, I mean, there's nothing but good things about this. Some of the comments that I've seen that people are talking about is that this is some sort of cheese grater. that's going to collect lint. And there's a couple reasons why that is incorrect. One, the cutouts are not rubbing against your pocket. They're recessed into holes. So you can't grate anything if they're not making contact with the pocket. Two, I've carried this knife for a couple weeks, to be honest. I've had it for a while. And every knife that I've ever owned, you're going to get lint in it eventually, right? So, let's see. So every knife that you have, you're going to get lint in it, right? There's a couple things a knife needs to do well. Well, there's a couple things that I demand out of knives. It needs to open reliably, it needs to close reliably, and it needs to, stay locked open while I'm cutting, right? Lint inside of these little vents doesn't affect anything I need the knife to do or anyone needs the knife to do. So, if you want to take a pretty picture, just blow the damn things out. So again, that's my opinion. I saw way too much complaining that was unmerited in regard to the vents here. So it's a nice design element. I hope he uses it on future designs because, again, weight reduction, aesthetic appeal, overall balance, things like that. It's worthwhile. It's worth doing again. So that's my opinion. That's my soapbox. Hopefully I didn't hurt anyone's feelings. But move to the rest of the handle, and there's been some pretty heavy sculpting going on here. The spine is rounded. You have a couple different planes going on. This is actually pretty complex for a solid piece of titanium. You guys can see how it's recessed here. You can see how the pocket clip has been bent to match the shape of the handle. Initially they built a jig to do this, but the jig didn't work out, so every single pocket clip had to be bent by hand. And that's just one of those fun little things that occurs when you're, building a knife and you just have unforeseen obstacles. Stainless steel lock insert, which has to be, connected externally because it's obviously quite difficult to get inside there. You do have some chamfering here on both sides to make disengagement quite easy. Now, with regard to disengagement, right when you disengage and go down, the detent ball does hit the tang of the blade right here, and then you have to overcome it. So a detent ramp would have improved that. I would have liked to see a detent ramp. The one thing that does make it less annoying is that this is where it hits the detent. The ball hits the blade tang and needs a detent ramp. Some knives, the balls hit the tang of the blade here, and so it's like halfway closed and then it completely stops and you have to push it the rest of the way. At least this one's towards the top, and so when you're disengaging and you move it like so, most of the time you're already past it, but obviously that'd be one thing nice to see is a detent ramp added to the blade tang. So action again is very, very smooth. Centering on this one, just about perfect, might be like a millimeter off, close enough, and then the blade is, you can't touch the tip on this one. It is well recessed into that handle. Nowhere to cut yourself on the back either. Plenty of distance here between the sharpened edge and the back of the blade, but obviously that's why you have this notch right here that's unsharpened, is because if that portion was sharpened all the way to the very edge, you might cut yourself, which you don't want. So pocket clip is left and right reversible. It attaches much the same way that like the Lion Steel ones do, so you've got just kind of over the top, and then obviously that gives it very deep carry. Ceramic detent ball, kind of in the bag style, works really, really well. I like the fact that it curves to the handle. So ergonomics, no hot spots on my hand. Maybe you might get one depending on your hand size right at the edge of the pocket clip. Again, my hand, it barely touches it. It doesn't affect me, but I think some of the smaller hands, they might feel that. Anyways, I mean, what an absolutely beautiful execution. An amazing knife. The model's designated here on the spine. But kudos to Liong. 15 years of designing knives is certainly something to be proud of. And I think this was a killer piece to commemorate that work and that energy and that drive. One other thing he told me about this knife is that he had he redesigned it 40 or 50 times. So I asked him what that meant in terms of hours, and he honestly had no idea. He said, I just don't count. I just keep coming back until it's right. So anyways, kudos to Liong, kudos to Riyadh, an amazing execution. I'm really, really happy to have another integral in my collection, especially one with a beautiful hand ground blade and, just really well done. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed checking out this video. The first run is dropped. There'll be 2 other runs later. No idea what they'll look like, but more videos to come. Take care.